There are nights when the world goes silent, but your mind refuses to follow. You lie there, eyes open, watching shadows crawl across the ceiling. Hours pass. The clock mocks you. Your body screams for rest, but sleep never comes. Modern medicine calls this insomnia. My grandmother called it separation from the earth. I know that feeling. I lived through it, but I also lived past it, long before sleeping pills existed. I am 97 years old now, and I cannot remember the last time I struggled to fall asleep. That might sound unusual, even impossible, but it is the truth. People ask me how I do it. They assume I have always been this way. They are wrong. When I was younger, much younger, I knew sleeplessness like an old companion. It haunted me for months. My mind raced every night. My body ached from exhaustion, but sleep would not come. And then one afternoon, an elder in my village handed me a root, not a pill, not a syrup, a root. She told me to boil it, drink it before sunset, and wait. I thought she was being kind, offering comfort more than cure, but I was desperate. I tried it. Within 2 weeks, my sleep returned. Not all at once, not violently, slowly, naturally, the way the body is meant to heal. That root is called valerian. You might have heard of it. You might have seen it in health stores, tucked into capsules, stripped of its power, marketed as a supplement. But what I used was not a capsule. It was the whole root, pulled from the earth, dried by the sun, prepared the way it had been prepared for thousands of years. I grew up in a village where nobody owned a pharmacy. We did not have hospitals nearby. If you were sick, you went to the elders. If you could not sleep, you did not get a prescription. You got a root, a leaf, a seed. These were not alternative medicines. They were the only medicines, and they worked, not because we believed in them, but because they had been tested by generations. Valerian was everywhere. It grew wild near water, in shaded places where the soil stayed damp. The plant itself was unimpressive. Tall, thin stalks, small white flowers. Nothing you would notice unless you knew what you were looking for. But the root, that was where the power lived. When you pulled it from the ground and cleaned it, the smell hit you immediately. Earthy, sharp, almost unpleasant. My grandmother said that smell was proof it was real. Anything too sweet, too easy, could not be trusted. She taught me how to prepare it. You take the dried root, break it into small pieces, and boil it in water for 10 to 15 minutes. The water turns pale brown. The smell softens but does not disappear. You let it cool, then drink it an hour before bed, not a full cup. Just half, enough to calm the body without forcing it. The first night I drank it, nothing happened. I lay down expecting a miracle, but my mind was still awake. I felt disappointed, but my grandmother had warned me. She said the root does not work like a drug. It does not knock you out. It does not shut your brain down. It calms you, slowly, gently. It teaches your body to relax again. By the third night, I noticed a difference. My thoughts were still there, but they were not racing. They moved slower, softer, like clouds drifting instead of crashing. I did not fight sleep. I let it come, and it did. By the 7th night, I was falling asleep within 20 minutes. My body stopped resisting. My mind stopped screaming. I woke up feeling rested, not drugged. There was no fog in my head, no numbness, just clarity. By the 14th night, my insomnia was gone. I kept drinking the root for another month just to be sure. Then I stopped. I did not need it anymore. My sleep had reset. My body remembered how to rest. That is the difference between a root and a pill. A pill controls you. A root teaches you. Years later, when I moved to a city, I saw valerian again, but it was different. It was in capsules, tablets, extracts. The labels promised fast relief. They called it a natural sleep aid, but the preparation was not natural. The dose was standardized. The root was processed, concentrated, stripped of everything except the active compounds. It worked faster, yes, but it worked differently. People took it every night. They became dependent. The root was no longer teaching the body, it was replacing the body's ability to calm itself. I spoke to a pharmacist once. I asked him why they changed it. He said it was about consistency. People wanted results they could measure. They wanted the same effect every time. But the root was never meant to be the same every time. It was meant to adapt. One harvest might be stronger, another might be milder. The body learned to respond, not to expect. That is when I began to understand what had been lost. Valerian is not new. It is not a modern discovery. Ancient Greeks wrote about it. Roman physicians used it. It appears in medieval texts recommended for nervousness, restlessness, and what they called melancholy. For thousands of years, people knew it worked. They did not need studies to prove it. They had experience. But then the pharmaceutical industry arrived. Companies realized they could synthesize sleep. They could create chemicals that mimicked the body's natural processes, but faster, stronger, more profitable. Benzodiazepines, barbiturates, sedative hypnotics. These drugs worked immediately. They knocked people out. Doctors loved them. Patients loved them. Sleep became something you could buy, swallow, and forget about. Valerian could not compete with that speed. It could not compete with that certainty. It took 2 weeks to work. It required patience. It did not fit into the modern medical model, so it was pushed aside, not banned, not destroyed, just quietly ignored. But some researchers kept studying it. In the 1980s and 90s, scientists began testing valerian in clinical trials. They wanted to know if it actually worked or if it was just folklore. The results surprised them. Valerian did work. It improved sleep quality. It reduced the time it took to fall asleep. It did not cause dependence. It did not create withdrawal. It was safe, even for long-term use. One study compared valerian to a common sleeping pill. The pill worked faster, but valerian worked better over time. After 2 weeks, people using valerian reported deeper sleep, fewer awakenings, and no side effects. People using the pill reported grogginess, memory problems, and rebound insomnia when they tried to stop. Another study focused on anxiety-related insomnia. Valerian root reduced both anxiety and sleeplessness. The researchers noted that it worked on the same brain receptors as benzodiazepines, but without the addictive properties. It enhanced GABA, a neurotransmitter that calms the nervous system. It did not force the brain to shut down. It helped the brain remember how to relax. These studies were published. They were peer-reviewed. They were real, but they were also quiet. No major news outlets covered them. No pharmaceutical companies promoted them, because valerian could not be patented. It was a plant. Anyone could grow it. Anyone could use it. There was no profit in that. I watched this happen over decades. I saw sleeping pills become a multi-billion-dollar industry. I saw people take them every night for years, unable to stop without suffering. I saw doctors prescribe them knowing they caused dependence. And I saw valerian root, the same root that saved my sleep, slowly disappear from conversation. Not because it did not work, because it worked too well, too cheaply, too simply. I am not saying there is a conspiracy. I am not saying companies actively buried valerian, but I am saying they did not need to. They just needed to make their product faster, louder, more convenient. They needed to make people believe that sleep was something broken, something that required intervention. They turned insomnia into a disease instead of a signal. Because that is what sleeplessness is. It is a signal. Your body is telling you something is wrong. Maybe you are stressed. Maybe your diet is unbalanced. Maybe you are overstimulated. Maybe you are disconnected from natural rhythms. Insomnia is not the problem. It is the symptom. Valerian does not ignore that signal. It listens to it. It calms the nervous system so the body can hear itself again. It does not erase the problem. It creates space for the body to solve the problem. That is why it takes 2 weeks. That is why it requires patience. That is why it cannot be rushed. I used valerian on and off for most of my life. Whenever I felt my sleep slipping, I returned to it. Not every night, not forever, just until my body remembered. And every time it worked, slowly, gently, the way healing is supposed to happen. I also learned that valerian was not the only root my people used for sleep. There was passion flower, which calmed racing thoughts. There was ashwagandha, which balanced stress hormones. There was chamomile, which soothed the stomach and the mind. These plants worked together. They supported the body instead of controlling it. But valerian was the strongest. It was the one elders reached for when nothing else worked. It was the root that brought people back from the edge of exhaustion. I have spoken to younger people about this. They are curious but also skeptical. They ask me if valerian really works. They ask me if it is safe. They ask me where they can find it. I tell them the truth. It works if you let it work. It is safe if you use it correctly. And it is still available, though not in the form I used. If you want to try valerian, find the root, not the capsules, not the tinctures, the actual dried root. Boil it, drink it, wait. Do not expect a miracle on the first night. Do not expect to feel drugged. Expect to feel calm. Expect your body to soften. Expect sleep to return, not because you forced it, but because you made space for it. I am not a doctor. I am not a scientist. I am just someone who lived long enough to see what works and what does not. I have seen people take sleeping pills for 30 years and still struggle. I have seen people drink valerian root for 2 weeks and never need it again. That tells me something. It tells me that the old ways were not primitive. They were patient. They understood that the body is not a machine. You cannot fix it with a switch. You have to listen to it. You have to give it time. You have to trust it. Modern medicine does not teach that. It teaches speed. It teaches control. It teaches that symptoms are enemies to be destroyed. But symptoms are not enemies. They are messengers. And when you silence the messenger, the message does not go away. It just gets louder. I have never taken a sleeping pill, not once. Not because I'm stubborn, but because I never needed to. Valerian gave me back my sleep when I was young. And when I stopped needing valerian, my body carried that lesson forward. I learned to recognize when I was pushing too hard. I learned to slow down before my sleep suffered. I learned to listen. That is the real cure. Not the root itself, but the wisdom it teaches. I do not know if pharmaceutical companies spent billions trying to bury valerian. I do not have access to boardrooms or secret meetings, but I do know they spent billions promoting their own products. I know they funded studies that supported their pills. I know they shaped medical education so doctors learned to prescribe drugs, not plants. I know they made sleep into a product instead of a process. And I know that in doing so, they made millions of people dependent on substances they did not need. Valerian was not buried. It was simply forgotten, and forgetting is easier than burying. You do not need to actively destroy something if you can just stop talking about it, if you can make it seem old-fashioned, inconvenient, unreliable, if you can make people believe that real medicine only comes from a lab, but real medicine came from the earth first. It still does. Valerian is still growing. It is still working. It is still waiting for people to remember. I am old now. My body has slowed, my hands shake, my eyes are dim, but my sleep is still strong. I close my eyes and I rest. I wake up clear. I do not fight my body anymore. I do not fear the night. That is what Valerian taught me, not to force, not to control, just to allow. I did not try to stay young. I did not try to outsmart my body. I just stopped interfering with it. I let it do what it was designed to do. And it has carried me further than most people ever expected. Sleep is not something you conquer. It is something you surrender to, and valerian root helps you remember how to surrender, not by knocking you out, not by controlling your brain, but by calming the noise long enough for your body to hear itself again. That is the cure, not in 14 days, not in a capsule, but in patience, in trust, in the quiet wisdom of a root that has been healing people long before anyone thought to profit from their suffering. I drank that root when I was young. I watched it work. I watched it fade from memory, and now I watch people search for it again, hungry for something real. It was never gone. We just stopped looking.